Hello and welcome to another ArtifactCCG.com video, and today we are finally going to be doing the green heroes. I'm just going to go through them as quick as I can. I've been putting this off for way too long, and eventually we'll get to green cards, and maybe at some point we'll cover all the cards I missed, and maybe even items. So we did finally get to 100 subscribers, guys. So if you are a subscriber and you have any questions that you would like to ask about Artifact, obviously I'm not going to break any NDAs, guys, but if you have questions about my favorite decks, playstyles, questions about the meta, things like that, feel free to comment in the comment section below, and if I get at least, I don't know, we'll say 10 questions by Monday, I will try to do a question video, and I will seek to answer your questions as best as I can. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Abaddon. So Abaddon is interesting. So at 4/9, he has a decent body, I guess. So he does one-hit creeps, and that's important. But he's not going to do much into heroes. And at 9 health, while it's decent, it's also... I mean, it dies to a decent number of cards or heroes in the game. Obviously not first round, but if they have any sort of additional damage helping them out, you're gonna die, right? This is no Axe, this is no Bristleback. 9 health, it does not put Abaddon out of range. And he's certainly gonna die in 2 rounds, which is actually kind of rough for Abaddon, because his passive ability is this Borrowed Time, which basically you can fully heal Abaddon and he becomes damage immune for the rest of the round. So he still dies to Condemns, but unfortunately it's a 2-round cooldown, which means that if you start him in the game, you're going to play that round, he's going to take a hit, and then it'll lose one of those turns of cooldown, so it'll be down to 1 cooldown, and then you'll get hit again, and then it would come off to cooldown. So if you're ever lined up across from a hero that has at least 5 damage, Abaddon will die in 2 rounds, and so while he would seem like this really tanky character that you could maybe afford to put into your lineup to start, and he's just going to not die, he doesn't really fulfill that. I mean, that being said, if you do put him as, like, your second deployed hero, he's certainly not going to die at that point. He'll take 1 shot, and then you can immune him. He'll take 1 shot, you can immune him. So, yeah, it's okay. As far as signature cards, Aphotic Shield is not bad at all. So purging enemy effects from a unit is quite good. I mean, you can use this actually to purge your opponent's heroes. So if they had, like, a Time of Triumph on them, you could, in theory, purge that from them. Not always going to be the most common occurrence, but I mean, you could. But more often than not, it will be used as just an early game trade winner. So if your hero's lined up across from another hero, you can buff them with 2 armor and 2 retaliate. It's a 4 damage swing. It's pretty good. It's a very solid card. However, as a whole, Abaddon just doesn't do enough with his body compared to a lot of the other green heroes. I mean, you're comparing him to, like, these passives that are just constantly creating value for your lane, and he just doesn't add up. And for that reason, he's probably like a 3.5. You could maybe make an argument for him as, like, a solo green character because he's harder to kill, but at that point, why not just run Rix if you really just want a solo green character? And, like, running a one of a color isn't that common, and I'm not sure that you really want to do it with Abaddon anyways. He's just not bringing enough to the table. But we do have next up is Chen. So Chen, once again, has that 4/9 stat line, but his ability has some crazy impact. So while Abaddon just sticks on the board and keeps hitting for 4 damage, Chen is going to get control of an enemy creep with that Holy Persuasion ability. It's not a cooldown of 4, so you're only going to use it once, but it's going to be worth it. I mean, the meta has a lot of Horn of the Alphas, Emissaries of the Quorum. Stealing that creep is definitely worth waiting the 4 rounds for it. I mean, that's when you really want to use it, is when they're dropping the big creeps anyways. But that being said, you know, does that make up for Chen? I mean, if you take a look at his hero card, it's once again a very late game effect. At 7 mana, you can fully heal each ally and give them damage immunity this round. I mean, that is a really powerful effect, but it's so late game, and it doesn't have that massive of a swing potential outside of just, you know, the combat, right? Whereas other cards like Coup de Grace can instantly remove an enemy hero. You look at, like, Assassinate, once again, instantly removing an enemy hero. Berserker's Call, instantly removing enemy heroes. You kind of get the picture here. A lot of these high-costed hero spells actually are offensive, and or they deny your opponent plays. Whereas if you cast Hand of God, your opponent can still just respond with an Annihilation. They can respond with their own cards, and you've spent all of your mana, and it's going to have a big effect, but it's not shutting your opponent out of place, and that's probably its biggest drawback. But overall, if you take a look at Chen, once again, the problem with him is that, I mean, it's not the same as Abaddon. Abaddon just sticks around and survives, right? Chen has these massive swings late in the game, but is that really worth giving up the tremendous lane presence that the other green heroes offer you? And I'd say no, except for maybe in a meta that's dominated by large creeps, and you deploy Chen in your third round, and you just hope to make use of his passive. Had a good time in the game. Overall, I'd give him maybe, I mean, once again in that 3.5 range. He has some applicability. I think Holy Persuasion could, in some metas, just be nuts, and then you'd see Chen pop up. But if the metas don't have a ton of big creeps, then I don't see you ever running Chen over some of the other green heroes. But let's go ahead and move on to Darkseer. So Darkseer is interesting. At 5'9", you know, decent stats. You're looking at Abaddon-esque without the Abaddon survivability. I mean, basically the same stat line as Abaddon and Chen. 1 more damage isn't that significant at all, except for maybe if you line up from a creep or from across from a hero in the first round, and then you're looking at, you know, in 2 rounds now you're dealing 10 instead of just 8. But his ability is really interesting. So Surge at an active of 2 is going to move an ally into another lane. Not himself, so move another ally. And that's really powerful. I mean, movement in this game is really important. However, Surge is really clunky because you have to put, like, you can't, it's not just a card that just moves heroes from lanes where you don't want them into lanes where you do want them. Because the thing is, let's say Darkseer dies and you're redeploying him, you're like, oh, I'm going to make use of his Surge. Well, you'd have to put him into the wrong lane to move the hero that's already in the wrong lane to another lane. Like, unless he has a blink already, and then you're going to use the blink on him, you didn't really gain any additional heroes. You just might get a better hero into that other lane. But if that's all you want is better heroes in the other lanes, then just run a better hero than Darkseer, right? But that being said, I think he could see play if it wasn't for this terrible hero card that is Ion Shell. Modify a unit with +3 Retaliate just isn't enough, right? It's just +3 damage, essentially, but way worse into any sort of armor. And, like, against certain heroes, like Viper, Ion Shell is just going to be terrible because, yeah, it'll trigger his passive twice. So, yeah, I don't know. Ion Shell is a terrible card. Doesn't do enough. I mean, you compare it to something like Magnus's signature card that's offering 3 damage and 3 cleave, and you're like, how is this even comparable? I mean, they aren't, right? Magnus obviously doesn't have a passive or, you know, an active ability. So, I mean, you can make that argument. But, I don't know. I think having 3 of these essentially terrible cards in your deck is not worth it to run a Darkseer. So, I'd probably put him at, I don't know, a 3. It's hard to give him lower than a 3 just because I could see Surge having so much value later on. But, yeah, he's just, yeah. But we got Drow next, guys. So, Drow is really, really powerful. I mean, that aura, all of your other allies having +1 attack in all the lanes is crazy. I mean, it helps your creeps do so much more damage. It helps your heroes win combats sooner than they would have. I mean, it's just really good. It's a lot of value. As long as you can keep Drow alive, she's doing work. And then her signature card is the most annoying card in the game. Like, Gust, being able to silence all enemy heroes for 4 is just crazy. Like, because you get into these late game rounds where they can spend 4 on Gust and then spend 4 on something else, and then, like, you're just sitting there with nothing that you can do. And while you can, initiative doesn't even matter against Gust, because while sure you get 1 play, right, and maybe you kill their only green hero, and then initiative did matter. But let's say they have 2 green heroes, right? If you're playing into, like, the green-blue combo deck, Gust is just the worst. It's just like, you can't do enough plays in one action to make a significant difference, especially against some of these decks. Because, I mean, if you're up against a list that has, like, 3 green heroes, they're often going to have, by the point you're into, like, the 8-9 mana rounds, they're going to have a cheating death down in a lane. And at that point, there's nothing you can do against Gust, right? Because the cards that would make the most like first play use out of mana are going to be cards that deal damage or kill or whatever it may be. So Assassinate, Coup, Annihilation, all those things, and all those cards get wrecked by Cheating Death, right? The only exception to this would be like an immediate play of like Time of Triumph on heroes. So initiative doesn't do a whole lot into Gust, because oftentimes when you like, oh man, it's just the worst, because your opponent's just gonna shut down all of your plays. So at most you get one play, and then you move on. I don't know. I hate Gust. It's I personally think it should be targeted. You like silence an enemy hero and its allied neighbors. I think that would make the card way cooler. Like good but not broken, and like I just think the most frustrating thing is when you come to the end of a game and it ends because your opponent played a Gust, and then in the next round they played a Gust. It's the most boring ending to a game ever. You can't do anything about it, except for not let them get to the point where they have a Cheating Death and they have the green heroes in the lane, and they can win off of that lane, right? But once you get to this situation where they can like Gust you twice in a row, there's almost nothing you can do, because as I said, the initial plays, even if you have initiative of like trying to kill a hero, are 50-50 roll to see if it actually works. Yeah, I don't know. I hate Gust, especially in combination with the fact that Cheating Death makes it really hard to shut off the Gust play, essentially. But yeah, I guess you just gotta run improvement destruction cards. I don't know. Before we move on, I should mention Drow's definitely a 5. 5 out of 5, guys. She's crazy good. Let's go ahead and talk about Enchantress. So Enchantress at 4/8 doesn't seem to have that good of a stat line. However, she has essentially like, I don't know, 14 or 16 health, because she gives herself and her allied neighbors +2 regeneration. So that's an additional 2 health every single round. So if she keeps getting hit by creeps, she's not going to take any damage. It's a lot of effective health for herself and for her allied creeps. That if they end up spawning next to her, it's just crazy. You win the creep combat from round 1. Your creeps aren't dying. Sometimes it can end up annoying if you can get to points where her passive isn't affecting anything next to her because they just didn't line up next to her as neighbors. So that's good that it has that drawback, kind of. But yeah, she's really good at generating lane presence. Unfortunately, Verdant Refuge is a pretty rough card. So just the passive of giving allies +1 armor, which, while really good in limited, is not really viable in constructed, at least in my opinion. Although I will say it's sort of maybe effective into conflagration. If your opponent plays a conflagration into a lane, you can answer with a Verdant Refuge and half the effect, but you're still trading the same amount of mana to just half that effect, right? Like, this isn't that good. It's pretty bad. And it costs 5, so having a bad, expensive card is rough. But it's an improvement, so you can cast it from a lane that doesn't matter, where you didn't have other mana plays, into other lanes. So in that sense, there's a little bit like more playability to this 5-cost card than like an expensive spell that's bad. But still, it's kind of what holds Enchantress back from being a crazy star count. I will say in draft, she's probably like a 4.5, in constructed closer to like a 4, just because that Verdant Refuge, while it gets value in draft, probably is not going to get much value in constructed. And moving along, we have Favren the Dreamer. So this is a Treant wannabe at 410, giving allied neighbors +1 armor is decent. It's not Treant, but it's a good common card. So this is a card that you can run in draft. If you just want to run it, you can. And with how solid green is in draft, I'd say Favren like deserves like a I'd say he's probably like the number 2 ranked common for me in draft, because he's got high health. He makes your creeps win creep combat, which is really important in draft, because I mean they'll only take 1 damage each round, whereas they're dealing 2 to the enemy creeps. So that's really good. If you start with the Favren, he's probably not going to die to an enemy hero. He is going to make your creeps win combat. So there's a lot of value there. Constructed wise, I mean, obviously he's just not as good as Treant, and like his signature card here is pretty bad, right? Like 0 attack is just rough. Like, there's something to be said for the fact that in draft you can drop this creep and it will do things, right? Like it's gonna maybe save a hero, or it's gonna block some damage to your tower. Having those extra blockers later on in the game when you're, going for the base race is really important. So once again, like Favren is still really good in draft, and you can safely pick green cards knowing that if nothing else, I'll just pick Favren and he's gonna provide lots of value for me. But yeah, you're not gonna see this guy in constructed. Probably like a 2.5, because I don't know, like winning creep combat is pretty good. It's pretty important in this game, guys. Yeah, what do we have next? Lycan. Okay, Lycan I love. So giving your allied neighbors +2 attack is really good. It's not as good as the armor of Treant in a sense, because armor can proc more than once in a round, whereas attack will not proc more than once in a round. So what I mean is, if maybe 2 creeps are attacking one of your creeps, and that creep has that buff from the Treant, that unit is essentially having 4 health added to it by that +2 armor. Whereas this +2 attack aura of Lycan is never going to do that. It's just going to make them hit for 2 more whenever that creep engages in combat. However, it's still really good. It still makes them kill enemy creeps in 1 round, so it's good for creep combat. And it's got more aggressive capability for taking a tower down quickly. I mean, Lycan is one of the few green heroes that can offer a lot of damage into the tower. I mean, if you look at him, his value is essentially 8 hitting the tower, right? Because if you have the 2 creeps and they're both not being blocked, if you have 2 units to his left and right, he's offering that +4 damage from his aura. But mainly, one of the reasons why I like him as one of the better aura characters is just the Savage Wolf is really good. Having a tempo play at 4, where maybe it's a lane where your opponent didn't want to commit many cards to, they only have a single hero, you have a couple, you drop a Savage Wolf down, and now you're threatening even harder. Even if you just have a single hero in that lane, just tossing down that Savage Wolf, and your opponent knowing that if they don't answer it, it's eventually going to be like a 6, 7, 8, 9 attack damage creep, is nice. I like that type of creep that just demands an answer at some point. That being said, it's not that crazy, because it's only gaining attack by 1 round, so it's not going to like massively ramp into tons of damage. It's just going to have a lot of value later on. But the +2 health each round is important, because that means it'll survive infinite creep combats. But yeah, I don't know. It's a great hero card, great passive, good, 10 health. I don't know. I'd rate him probably like a 4.5 in draft. Well, I could almost rate him a 4.5 in draft and like a 4.5 in constructed. That might be a little high, but I think there's a lot to be said for these type of heroes that can win the creep combat. And I like his signature card. He's really good. Unfortunately, he doesn't see a lot of play just because Treant fills a very similar slot and is slightly better in the type of green decks that are being run. So if we do look at Treant here, we're just going to skip right to him. Treant has this allied neighbors have +2 armor, which, as I said, is more value than the attack because it can proc more than once in a round. But the reason why he sees more play is basically the defensive nature of that is more valuable than the offensive nature in the green decks that are on, because the green decks that are on are all about this like ramp playstyle where you bump up your mana a bunch and drop down these high value plays. And in such a deck, you just need to survive until you can pull off that ramp play. You just need your heroes to survive through that ramp play. You need to not lose the game before that happens. So you don't need to deal an extra, 4 damage from Lycan. But if you can keep, maybe you toss like a Drow into the lane with Treant so that the Drow lines up next to the Treant and has an additional 2 armor. And if that Treant can keep your Drow alive for longer, long enough to pull off, a combo in some lane, then that's produced more value than the passive attack damage of a Lycan. So for that reason, he's currently more often than not played over Lycan, because yeah, as I said, it's just the surviving nature of him is good, and also even his creeps as just a drop down play. While you could argue that they're in some ways just better than the wolves, because while the wolves can generate their aggression on their own, Roseleaf Druid, if you just play it in the round of 4, like the next round you're at 6 mana, because it bumped him up by 1, and you can already play Stars Align into Time of Triumph, right? And that's obviously a great play, right? If you can, in the round that would typically be 5 mana, drop a Time of Triumph, that's going to be a lot of value. For that reason, yeah, so Treant is just crazy good. I'd be tempted to give him, I'll still give him a 4.5 out of 5. Treant and Lycan are extremely close. Enchantress is like them, and her passive is in some ways better than the others because it also applies to herself. But the problem with Enchantress is that she has a bad hero card, whereas both Lycan and Treant have useful hero cards. I think Lycan hero's card has the potential to do the most on its own, but Roseleaf Druid has the most potential in the type of green decks that are being run right now. So not only does the armor just play more naturally into the green strategy of like survive until you play ramp cards, and then pull off, in like the blue-green, you're pulling off some crazy combo, and the red-green, you're just buffing yourself with like Time of Triumph. Yeah, Treant just fits better right now. So yeah, he's a crazy good hero. Definitely consider running him if you're building a green deck. Next we have Magnus. Magnus is 419, so 10 health, just like all these other green heroes. There's a lot of, this is kind of the standard line for green heroes. It's 4 attack and then either 9 or 10 health. So there's not a lot of differentiation there. So then you have to look into the passives, and lo and behold, there's no passive. And then you look at your cards, and Empower is really good. Like the +3 attack and +3 cleave is no joke. That +3 cleave will kill creeps if they're in creep combat. I mean, they take the 2 from the creep across them, and then the 3 from the Empower. So that's significant, and the +3 is sometimes enough to make the difference between killing a hero or not in the second round, and even that cleave can kill a hero at times in the second round, especially when you're looking at the blue squishy heroes. Maybe they did something like Cunning Plan to move the hero off from facing off directly with you, and you can just Empower, and now they're still dying anyways. Very good card, but it's also in some ways it's more value than the creeps because it sticks with the hero for the rest of the game, and it's not going to die like the creeps of Lycan and Treant can. But in other ways, it's just a little bit more clunky. Like, you can't block enemy heroes with it. If you're not lined up against an enemy, the cleave is not going to do anything. And at that point, you're just paying 4 for +3 attack. I don't know. The card's good. The hero's good. But I think he's just more like a 4-star hero. I don't think that he has quite the upside of the passives of the Lycan and the Treant. Yeah, as good as Empower is, and as good as it is to have this constant buff on your heroes, I don't think that it makes up for the lack of a passive. Especially since, I mean, it's 3 cards in a 40-card deck, you might never see them. Yeah, we can go ahead and move on. Trying to go quickly here. We have Omni Knight, and Omni Knight, a lot of people really like him. I have mixed feelings about him. He seems like he should, on paper, be really good, although I have found that Purification is almost meaningless. Like, that heal for 3 isn't significant. It's not often, like, the correct threshold for saving a unit. I mean, if you look at, like, heroes, right? They'll be, like, 9 health, and they'll take, like, 7 damage one round from, like, a red hero or something, like an axe. And then the next round, they're taking another 7, so that heal 3 isn't doing enough. It's just... But, I mean, it has its uses every once in a while. Certainly not as good as Lycan or Treant's passive. But his card is actually extremely crazy. So it's Lycan Enchantress, but it's for all of your allies in the lane, not just neighbors. So modify green hero with allies have +2 regeneration. That is insane. If your opponent doesn't have wave clear or some way to deal with it, like if it's like red-green versus red-green and you draw your all-seeing one's favor before they do, it's going to be like a good game because that adds so much value. It's potentially adding like 10 health a round for a 4-cost card. Like, it's crazy good. And for that reason, like, Omni Knight can get an extremely high rating from some players. But once again, I have a hard time adding value to heroes just because of their hero card. I mean, let me clarify. I do add a lot of value to cards like Assassinate, Coup de Grace, Berserker Skull, Duel, because I really value being able to remove heroes at key points in the game. And while All Seen One's Favor is like good. It's not going to be good every single time you draw it. And if you don't draw it, you're losing a lot of the package that is Omni Knight, right? Like, you want to draw it early and then win lanes through all seen one favor. But if you draw that in late game, like, at that point, the damage counts. Like, if your opponent's already dropped a Time of Triumph, like, what is this all seen one's favor going to do? Whereas, like, cards like, hero cards like Coup de Grace, when you draw those cards, they're going to have a high impact. Then again, they do stick up your card in the middle of the game, so maybe I'm just rambling at this point. Because I can't decide what I think of Omni Knight. I'll give him just a solid 4.5 out of 5. Just because everybody else seems to think he's great. I just haven't enjoyed playing him when I've played. I think that's my problem. It's just like, when I play like Lycan and Treant, I immediately get this value from the passives every single game. And when you play Omni Knight, he's just a slightly better stat line, and you might draw a broken hero card. I don't know. He's good. He's good, guys. I gave him 4.5, didn't I? Oh, Rix. Oh, Rix. Okay. So 3-7 is terrible. You're not even killing creeps with him. He's dying to almost every red hero in the game, practically. At least the ones that are played. And, yeah, his card, guys, before we talk about his passive, is terrible. So compare Drow's silence all heroes for 4 to this guy's silence a unit for 5. So in theory, you can silence creeps with this. You can silence your own heroes with this. But it's pretty bad. This is like the downside to running Rix, is you get 3 of these overcosted weak effects. They're not entirely useless. I mean, you can use them on blue heroes tossed into lanes to make sure they don't annihilate you or something. And, you know, so it does have that purpose there if you're already ahead. But it's pretty bad. Okay, so, I don't know. It's not worth talking more about. But his passive, Relentless Rebel, is pretty crazy. Rapid Deployment has a lot of value. And I think that when I've tried running Rix, what I've basically done is I've made sure to have Reptile Signet Rings, which are actually being shown right here, guys. It's kind of funny. Because they reduce his bounty so that it's not as bad if he's dying all these every round, basically. And then I often try stuff like Seraphim Shield, which is like, if you put that on Rix, it's like a poor man's Vesture, because you're decreasing all units attack by 2. But at that point, why not just pay 6 more gold for a Vesture of the Tyrant? I don't know. Like, I feel like the only true use for Rix is to just put him in as a 1-of hero and splash in some really powerful green cards, such as maybe even the Mana Wrap cards of Stars Align and Salamani's Favor. You just toss Rix into your deck, and, you know, he's always going to be alive, so you'll always be able to use those cards when you draw them. But other than that, his body just does so little, and I don't know. Relentless Rebel, while crazy, is just, it's not enough. You could just run a different green hero who's going to survive an extra round, right? And not going to die every round that he spawns. So, yeah, I don't know. Rix is okay. I'll rate him like a 2, but with the caveat that if you can ever find a really powerful effect, that having that respawn every round with, then he could maybe see play, because that's a pretty unique ability. Viper here, once again another 410 stat line, but this time we have kind of a sad passive. So Corrosive Skin, whenever he takes battle damage from somebody, he's going to modify a unit with -1 attack. It will proc twice if a unit has like Retaliate, so if you're lined up against LC, LC will have 4 attack after attacking you, because she's going to be reduced twice. But when you compare the effect of, you know, reducing, you know, maybe a hero's, but sometimes it'll just be a creep that's going to die anyways. Right? So a lot of time it does nothing. When you compare a do nothing and sometimes reduce attack passive to a make your creeps win the creep combat of the Enchantress, Lycan, and the Treant, it's like Viper just can't compare. And then you compare his signature card, and it's on the level with like Enchantress, right? So give your unit, deal 2 piercing damage to this unit before the action phase until it dies. The problem with this card is that opponents will buy like a TP scroll and just TP them out, or they'll, you know, toss a cloak on them and they'll survive for longer, or they'll heal them and they'll survive for longer, or it will just take 5 turns to kill a 10 health hero. All right, it's just, it's so bad, and it doesn't do anything around you play it. Like if it was like deal 2 damage, then do 2 the rest of the time, it'd be great. It would be a playable 3-cost card, but as it is, it's pretty bad. I don't think I've ever played it and had it actually kill a unit. Like, ever. So yeah, I don't know. Like Viper just doesn't compare to the other aura green heroes. So I'm just gonna give him like a 2 out of 5. Interesting that I gave him, I think, the lowest rating of any of the green heroes. But I think he just truly does have the lowest upside. I mean, even like Abaddon, Chen, and Darkseer, I can all see potentials where they're going to have a lot of value. But Viper, I just don't see. So yeah, if just as a wrap-up, I've been rambling a lot. I know that. Sorry, guys. Lycan, Enchantress, and Treant are all crazy for making you win the creep combats. Lycan and Treant take the gold in that competition just because their hero cards are so much better than Enchantresses. But you can run all 3 of them in draft and they're going to be great. Drow is just nuts and is also nuts in draft. Beyond that, you know, I think green is one of the more balanced set of heroes in the game. Like, there are lots of green characters that could be like, yeah, you could play them. Like, you can play Omni Knight. You can play Treant. You can play Lycan. You can play Enchantress. You can play Drow. You can play Magnus. And you can even justify Darkseer, Chen, and maybe Abaddon. But like Darkseer and Chen in specific decks for either gaining that mobility or gaining the creep counters. So yeah, that's a lot of playable heroes, especially when you compare it to a color like red. So yeah, I think green is a great color. A lot of good heroes. Really good at gaining value. But yeah, I don't know. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I will be doing the main deck analysis on those cards sometime soon. And as I said, if you guys are subscribed and you want to ask questions, just post them in the comments below, and I will hopefully be able to do a Q&A video at some point next week. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.